viewers, and welcome to another chapter of reading. Before I begin reading, I would like to address that it is the character of Harry Potter's 45th birthday. Can you believe that? I kind of wonder how he would celebrate. Maybe Ginny takes him to a Quidditch game. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. It is also J.K. Rowling's birthday. She is 60 years old. 6 decades. Wow. Honestly, regarding her stance, I'm going to make it clear that I disagree with her. But I love Harry Potter. I think that's clear throughout every chapter I've read so far, and will continue to read. Because, in my opinion, you can still love the art even if you disagree with the artist. For example, the art form surrealism. I'm personally not fond of it, but don't let that stop me from seeing the smile on your face when you talk about it. And I can respect the thought process behind Salvatore Dali's The Persistence of Memory. So it's like, you can still respect the artist and respect the art even if you disagree with their views. Rather than choosing one side strictly or the other side strictly, have like a middle ground where you can disagree but also respect and love the art established. And that is the case I'm doing with Potter and J.K. Rowling. Because she has contributed so much thoughts and a lot of lore about Harry Potter that it's like, it's hard not to love it. It's really hard not to. And considering Harry Potter personally helped me throughout times where I was when I was going back and forth with the idiot who shares half my chromosomes and trying to heal from the residual effects, it's like Harry Potter has been there for me. I'm not gonna walk away just because I disagree with J.K. Rowling. And you guys can hate me for that all you want, but I'm being honest with you guys. I'm being completely honest. So, yes, you can respect the art even if you disagree with the artist. And if you do end up agreeing with my stance, that's just as valid too. But don't neglect what she contributed, because she has contributed so much. Now, onto the chapter, shall we? Chapter 20. Lord Voldemort's Request. Harry and Ron left the hospital wing first thing on Monday morning, restored to full health by the ministrations of Madame Pomfrey, and now able to enjoy the benefits of having been knocked out and poisoned. The best of which was that Hermione was friends with Ron. Hermione was friends with Ron again. Hermione even escorted them down to breakfast, bringing her the news that Ginny already argued with Dean. The drowsing creature in Harry's chest suddenly raised its head, sniffing the air hopefully. What kind of creature would be drowsing in your chest, Harry? Could it be a dragon? Callback Just not akin to Ripper. Call back to Prisoner of Azkaban. So, what type of creature, Harry? What did they row about? He asked, trying to sound casual as they turned onto a seventh floor corridor that was deserted but for a very small girl who had been examining a tapestry of trolls in tutus. Okay, I would have loved to have seen that in the films just to be like, nope, 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 that does not work. She looked terrified at the sight of the approaching 6 years and dropped the heavy brass scales she was carrying. It's all right, said Hermione kindly, hurrying forward to help her. Here. She tapped the broken scales with her wand and said, Reparo. The girl did not say thank you, but remained rooted to the spot as they passed and watched them out of sight. Ron glanced back at her. I swear they're getting smaller, he said. Never mind her, said Harry a little impatiently. What about Ginny and... What did Ginny and Dean row about, Hermione? Oh, she was laughing about McLaggen hitting that ladder at you, said Hermione. It must have looked funny, said Ron reasonably. It didn't look funny at all, said Hermione hotly. It looked terrible, and if you didn't make something about it, Harry, you could have been very badly hurt. Yeah, I'm with Hermione on this one, Ron. Yeah, well, there was no need for Ginny and Dean to split up over it, said Harry, still trying to sound casual. Or are they still together? Yes, they are. But why are you so interested? Asked Hermione, giving Harry a sharp look. I just don't want my Quidditch team messed up again, he said hastily, but Hermione continued to look suspicious. And he was almost relieved when a voice behind them called, Harry! Giving him an excuse to turn his back on her. Oh, hi, Luna. I went to the hospital waiting to find you, said Luna, rummaging in her bag. But they said you left. She thrust what appeared to be a green onion, a large spotted toadstool, and a considerable amount of what looked like cat litter into Ron's hands. Having cats at home, I know what cat litter looks like, so for that to be mentioned in here is just perfect. Now I wonder, how many of you guys have cats at home? Let me know in the comments too. Finally pulling out a rather rubby scroll of parchment that she handed to Harry. I've been told to give you this. It was a small roll of parchment, which Harry recognized at once as another invitation to a lesson with Dumbledore. Tonight, he told Ron and Hermione once he unrolled it. Nice commentary last match, said Ron to Luna as she took back the green onion, the toadstool, and the cat litter. Luna smiled vaguely. You're making fun of me, aren't you? She said. Everyone says I was dreadful. No, I'm serious, said Ron earnestly. I can't remember enjoying commentary more. What is this, by the way? He added, holding the onion-like object up to Iowa. Oh, it's a pretty fruit, she said, stuffing the cat litter and the toadstool back into her bag. You can keep it if you like. I got a few of them. They're really excellent for warding off golden plimpies. and she walked away, leaving Ron chortling, still clutching the gritty root. You know, she's grown on me, Luna, he said as they set off again for the Great Hall. I know she's insane, but it's in a good... He stopped talking very suddenly. Lavender Brown was standing at the foot of the marble staircase looking thunderous. Yeah, thunder would probably be a good way to describe that. Hi, said Ron nervously. Come on, Harry muttered to Hermione, and they sped past, though not before they heard Lavender say, Why didn't you tell me we were getting out today? And why was she with you? Ron looked both sulky and annoyed when he appeared at breakfast half an hour later. And though he sat with Lavender, Harry did not see them exchange a word all the time they were together. Hermione was acting as though she was quite oblivious to all this. But once or twice Harry saw an inexplicable smirk across her face. All that day she seemed to be in a particularly good mood. And that evening in the common room she even consented to look over, in other words, finish writing, Harry's herbology essay. Something she had been resolutely refusing to do up to this point because she had known that Harry would then let Ron copy his work. Thanks a lot, Hermione, said Harry, giving her a hasty pat on the back as he checked his watch and saw that it was nearly 8 o'clock. Listen, I've got to hurry or I'll be late for Dumbledore. She didn't answer, but merely crossed out a few of his feeble sentences in a weary sort of way. Grinning, Harry hurried out through the portrait hole and off to the headmaster's office. The gargoyle leapt aside at the mention of toffee eclairs. Those actually sound good. Wonder if he could find a recipe for them. I'll follow up on it for you next week. And Harry took the spiral staircase 2 steps at a time, knocking on the door just as a clock within chimed 8. Oh, speaking of following up, if I remember correctly, last week they mentioned crystallized pineapple, and I wondered about crystallized watermelon. It is possible to crystallize a watermelon, but it is very difficult due to the water content. That said, I do want to try it. But anyway, just following up on that for you guys. Moving on. Enter, called Dumbledore. But as Harry put out a hand to push the door, it was wrenched open from inside. There's the Professor Trelawney. Aha! She cried dramatically, pointing at Harry as she blinked at him through her magnifying spectacles. So this is the reason I'm to be thrown unceremoniously from your office, Dumbledore? My dear Sybil, said Dumbledore in a slightly exasperated voice, there is no question of throwing you unceremoniously from anywhere. But Harry does have an appointment, and I really don't think there is any more to be said. Very well, said Professor Trelawney in a deeply wounded voice. If you will not banish the unsuffering mad, so be it. Perhaps I shall find a school where my talents are better appreciated. Better appreciated? Wow, Trelawney. I would think you could be a little more grateful considering it's Dumbledore and not Umbridge. Order the Phoenix callback. She pushed past Harry and disappeared down the spiral staircase. They heard her stumble halfway down, and Harry guessed that she had tripped over one of her trailing shawls. Yeah, that's why a scarf-like shawl would be a little more ideal. Please close the door and sit down, Harry, said Dumbledore, sounding rather tired. Oh, what is this? Tired is my new trigger word for a yawn? Harry obeyed, noticing that as he took his usual seat in front of Dumbledore's desk, that the heavens had laid between them once more, as did two tiny crystal bottles full of swirling memory. Professor Trelawney still isn't happy for his teaching then? Harry asked. No, said Dumbledore. Divination is turning out to be much more trouble than I could have foreseen, never having studied the subject myself. I cannot ask Friends to return to the forest, for he is now an outcast, nor can I ask Sybil Trelawney's leave. Between ourselves, she has no idea of the danger she would be in outside the castle. She does not know, and I think it would be unwise to enlighten her that she made the prophecy about being Voldemort, you see. Dumbledore heaved a deep sigh, then said, "But never mind my staffing problems. We have much more important matters to discuss. Firstly, have you managed the task I sent you at the end of our previous lesson?" "Ah," said Harry, brought up short. But with apparitions, lessons, Quidditch, and Ron being poisoned, and getting his skull cracked, and his determination to find out what Draco Malfoy was up to, Harry almost forgot about the memory Dumbledore asked him to extract from Professor Slughorn. "Well, I asked Professor Slughorn about it at the end of potions, sir, but he wouldn't give it to me." There was a little silence. "I see," said Dumbledore eventually, peering at Harry over the top of his half-moon spectacles, and giving Harry the unusual sensation that he was being X-rayed. "And you feel that you have exerted your very best efforts in this matter, do you? That you have exercised all your considerable ingenuity? That you have left no death of kind unplumbed in your quest to retrieve the memory?" "Well," said Harry, stalled, at a loss for what to say next. His single attempt to get hold of the memory suddenly seemed embarrassingly feeble. "Well, the day Ron swallowed both potion by mistake, I took him to Professor Slughorn. I thought maybe if I got Professor Slughorn in a good enough mood—" "And did that work?" asked Dumbledore. "Well, no, sir, because Ron got poisoned, which naturally made you forget all about trying to retrieve the memory. I would have expected nothing else while your best friend was in danger. Once it became clear that Mr. Weasley was going to make a full recovery, however, I would have hoped that you returned to the task I set you. I thought I made it clear to you how very important that memory is. Indeed, I did my best to impress upon you that it is the most crucial memory of all, and that we will be wasting your time without it." A hot, prickly feeling of shame spread from the top of Harry's head all the way down his body. Dumbledore had not raised his voice. He did not even sound angry, but Harry would have preferred him to yell. His cold disappointment was worse than anything. "Sir," he said a little desperately, "it isn't that I wasn't bothered or anything. I've just had other things. Other things on my mind." Dumbledore finished the sentence for him. "I see." Silence fell between them again. The most uncomfortable silence Harry ever experienced with Dumbledore. It seemed to go on and on, punctuated only by the little grunting snores of the portrait of Armando Dippet over Dumbledore's head. Harry felt strangely diminished, as though he shrunk a little since he entered the room. When he could stand it no longer, he said, "Professor Dumbledore, I'm really sorry. I should have done more. I should have realized you wouldn't have asked me to do it if it wasn't really important." "Thank you for saying that, Harry," said Dumbledore quietly. "May I hope, then, that you will give this matter higher priority from now on? There will be little point in our meeting after tonight unless we have that memory." "I'll do it, sir. I'll get it from him," he said earnestly. "And we shall say no more about it just now," said Dumbledore more kindly. "But continue our story where we left off. You remember where that was?" "Yes, sir," said Harry quickly. "Voldemort killed his father and his grandparents, making it look as though his Uncle Morphin did it. Then he went back to Hogwarts and he asked Professor Slughorn about Horcruxes," he mumbled shamefacedly. "Very good," said Dumbledore. "Now you will remember, I hope, that I told you at the very outset of these meetings of ours that we would be entering the realms of guesswork and speculation." "Yes, sir. Thus far, as I hope you agree, I have shown you reasonably firm sources of fact for my deductions as to what Voldemort did until the age of 17. Harry nodded. "But now, Harry," said Dumbledore, "now things become murkier and stranger. If it was difficult to find evidence about the boy riddle, it has been almost impossible to find anyone prepared to reminisce about the man Voldemort. In fact, I doubt whether there is a soul alive, apart from himself, who could give us a full account of his life since he left Hogwarts. However, I have two last memories that I would like to share with you." Dumbledore indicated the two little crystal bottles gleaming inside the pensive. "I shall then speak about of your opinion as to whether the conclusions I have drawn from them seem likely." The idea that Dumbledore valued his opinion this highly made Harry feel even more deeply ashamed that he failed in the task of retrieving the Horcrux memory, and he shifted guiltily in his seat as Dumbledore raised the first of the two bottles to the lid and examined it. "I feel you, Harry. I probably would be the same way, because I have a tendency to feel deeply, and I do mean deeply." "I hope you are not tired of diving into other people's memories, for they are curious recollections, these two," he said. "This first one came from a very old house elf by the name of Hokey. Before we see what Hokey witnessed, I must quickly recount how Lord Voldemort left Hogwarts. He reached the 7th year of his schooling with, as you might have expected, top grades in every examination he had taken. All around him his classmates were deciding which jobs they were to pursue once they had left Hogwarts. Nearly everybody expected spectacular things from Tom Riddle, prefect, head boy, winner of the award for Ministry of Magic, offered to set up appointments, put him in touch with useful contacts. He refused all offers. The next thing the staff knew, Voldemort was working at Bogan and Burke's. At Bogan and Burke's? Harry repeated, stunned. At Bogan and Burke's, repeated Dumbledore calmly. I think you will see what attractions the place held for him when we have entered his memory. But this was not Voldemort's first choice of job. Hardly anyone knew of it at the time. I was one of the few in whom the then headmaster could find it. But Voldemort first approached Professor Tippett and asked whether he could remain at Horcruxes as a teacher. He managed to stay here. Why? Asked Harry, more amazed still. I believe he had several reasons, though he confided none of them to Professor Tippett, said Dumbledore. Firstly, and very importantly, Voldemort was, I believe, more attached to this school than he has ever been to Professor. Hogwarts was where he had been happiest. The first and only place he had felt at home. Harry felt slightly uncomfortable at these words, for this was exactly how he felt about Hogwarts too. Oh, Harry. Your feelings are very valid, but just remember you are not Lord Voldemort, okay? Secondly, the castle was a stronghold of ancient magic. Undoubtedly, Voldemort had penetrated many more of its secrets than most of the students who passed through the place, but he may have felt that there were still mysteries to unravel, stories of magic to tap. And thirdly, as a teacher, he would have had great power and influence over young witches and wizards. Perhaps he had gained the idea from Professor Selkow, the teacher with whom he was on best terms, but demonstrated how influential a role a teacher can play. My bag is itchy. I do not imagine for an instant that Voldemort envisaged spending the rest of his life at Hogwarts. But I do think that he saw it as a useful recruiting ground, and a place where he might begin to build himself an army. But he didn't get the job, sir. No, he did not. Professor Tippett told him that he was too young at 18, but invited him to reapply in a few years, if he still wished to teach. How did you feel about that, sir? Harry asked hesitantly. Deeply unusual, said Dumbledore. I advised our mother against the appointment. I did not give the reasons I have given you. For Professor Tippett was very fond of Voldemort, and convinced of his honesty, but I did not want Lord Voldemort back at the school, and especially not in a position of power. The Tippets of irony. Which job did he want, sir? What subject did he want to teach? Somehow, Harry knew the answer even before Dumbledore gave it. Defense against the dark arts. He was being taught at the time by an old professor by the name of Galatea Merithos, who had been at Hogwarts for nearly 50 years. Fun little tidbit, Galatea is one of the moons of Neptune. And I kind of want to know more about her now that I think about it. Like, what kind of life did she have? What sparked her to become a defense against the dark arts teacher? I just want to know more about her, you know? But yes, for those of you who are strictly familiar with the films, this is the Professor Mary Slughorn mentioned. But moving on. So Voldemort and help support him first. And all the staff who admired him said what a waste it was. A brilliant young wizard like that working in a shop. However, Voldemort was no mere assistant. Polite, handsome, and clever, he was soon given particular jobs of the type that only exist in a place like Horcruxes, which specializes, as you know, Harry, in objects with unusual and powerful properties. Voldemort was sent to persuade people caught with their treasures for sale by the partners, and he was, by all accounts, unusually gifted at doing this. I bet he was, said Dumbledore, said Harry, unable to contain himself. Sorry. It feels like I'm not used to being up at this hour. I'm usually up a little later. Quite, said Dumbledore with a faint smile. And now it is time to hear from Hoagie the House Elf, who worked for very wait, by the name of Headstone Smith. Again, no relation, though most of my family are Hufflepuffs, so possibly. Dumbledore tapped a bottle with his wand. The cork flew out, and he tipped the swirling memory into the pensive, saying as he did so, "Actually, Harry got to his feet and bent once more over the rippling silver contents of the stone basin until his face touched them. He tumbled through dark nothingness and landed in a sitting room in front of an immensely old lady wearing a elaborate ginger wig and a brilliant pink set of robes that flowed all around her, giving her the look of a melting iced cake. She was looking into a small gold mirror, dabbing rouge onto her already scarlet cheeks with a large powder puff, while the tiniest and oldest house elf Harry had ever seen laced her fleshy feet into tight satin slippers. "Hurry up, Pokey," said Hepzibah imperiously. "It's said he'd come aboard. It's only a couple minutes to and he's never been late yet." She took away her powder puff as the house elf straightened up. The top of the elf's head barely reached the seat of Hepzibah's chair, and her papery skin came off her frame just like the perched linen sheet she wore draped like a toga. "How do I look?" said Hepzibah, turning her head to admire the various angles of her face in the mirror. "Lovely, madam," squeaked Hokey. could only assume that it was down in Hope's contract that she must fly through her teeth and ask this question, because Hepzibah Smith looked a long way from lovely in his opinion. Yeah, probably because she put too much rouge. That's why I don't wear makeup very often. Like, if I do, it's usually foundation, eyeshadow, and a little bit of lip gloss. Blush now and then, but nothing that makes me look like a clown. Okay, I'm a comedian, yes, but no red nose. Or brightly colored wig. That's just, no. But moving on. A twinkling doorbell rang and both mistress and elf jumped. Quick, he's here, Hooky! Cried Hepzibah, and the elf scurried out of the room, which was so crammed with objects that it was difficult to see how anybody could navigate their way across it without knocking over at least a dozen things. There were cabinets full of little lacquered boxes, cases of golden embossed books, shelves of orbs and celestial orbs. Would have loved to see how they looked in the film. I bet they're pretty. And many flourishing potted plants in brass containers. In fact, the room looked like a cross between a magical antique shop and a conservatory. The house elf returned within minutes, followed by a tall young man Harry had no difficulty whatsoever in recognizing as Voldemort. He was plainly dressed in a black suit. His hair was a little longer than it had been at school, and his cheeks were hollow. But all of this suited him. He looked more handsome than ever. He picked his way through the cramped room with an air that showed he had visited many times before, and bowed low over Hepzibah's little hand, brushing it with his lips. "The party flowers," he said quietly, producing a bunch of roses from nowhere. "Naughty boy, you shouldn't have," squealed old Hepzibah, though Harry noticed she had an empty vase standing ready on the nearest table. "You just spoil this old Hades toy. Sit down. Where's Sophie?" The house elf had come back into the room carrying a tray of little cakes, which she set at her mistress's elbow. I question the practicality of this placement, because if you accidentally set your elbow on the cakes, then they would be squished, and I would prefer like a table or something. I would think amongst all those objects she has a table somewhere. "Help yourself, Tom," said Hepzibah. "I know you love my cakes. Well, how are you? You look pale. I overworked you at that shop. I've said it 100 times." Voldemort smiled mechanically, and Hepzibah simpered. "What was your excuse for visiting this time?" she asked, batting her lashes. "Mr. Brooke would like to make an improved offer for the remainder armor," said Voldemort. "500 galleons. He feels it's more than that." No, not so fast. I think you're only here for my trinkets," pouted Hepzibah. "I am ordered here because of them," said Voldemort proudly. "I am only a poor assistant, madam. You must do as you're told. Mr. Burke wishes me to inquire—" "Oh, Mr. Burke, three," said Hepzibah, waving a little hand. "I've got something to show you that I've never shown Mr. Burke. You keep it a secret, Tom, and you promise you won't tell Mr. Burke I brought it. He did not let me rest if he really showed it to you. And I'm not selling, not to Burke, not to anyone. But you, Tom, you'd appreciate a book's history, and how many galleons you can get for it." "I'd be glad to see anything that Hepzibah shows me," said Voldemort quietly, and Hepzibah gave another foolish giggle. I have to keep turning up on me. What people are you? I went to show much better find this treasure. In fact, you're both while you're at it. You've met him, squeaked the house elf, and Harry saw two other boxes, one on top of the other, moving across the room as if of their own volition, though he knew the tiny elf was holding them over her head as she wended her way between tables, I wish I would have, hoofs, and footstools. No, said Hepzibah happily, taking the boxes from the elf, laying them in her lap, and preparing to open the topmost one. I think you like this, Tom. Oh, if my family knew I was showing you. They can't wait to get their hands on this. She opened the lid. Harry edged forward a little to get a better view, and saw what looked like a small golden cup with two finely wrought handles. I wonder whether you know what it is, Tom. Pick it up, have a good look, whispered Hepzibah, and Voldemort stretched out a long-fingered hand and lifted the cup by one handle out of its snug silken wrappings. Harry thought he saw a red gleam in his dark eyes. His greedy expression was curiously mirrored on Hepzibah's face, except that her tiny eyes were fixed upon Voldemort's handsome features. Patchwork, murmured Voldemort, examining the engraving upon the cup. And this was... Hufflepuff says you very well know, you clever boy, said Hepzibah, leaning forward with a long creaking of corsets and actually pinching his hollow cheek. Didn't I tell you I was distantly descended? This has been handed down in the family for years and years. Lovely, isn't it? And all sorts of powers it's supposed to possess, too. But I haven't tested them thoroughly. I just keep it nice and safe in here. She hooked the cup back off. She hooked the cup back off Voldemort's long forefinger and restored it gently to its box. He went intent upon settling it carefully back into position to notice the shadow that crossed Voldemort's face as the cup was taken away. Now then, said Hepzibah happily, where's Hokey? Oh yes, there you are. Take it away now, Hokey. The elf obediently took the boxed cup, and Hepzibah turned her attention to the much splattered box in her lap. I think you'll like this one more, Tom, she whispered. Even the little table so you can see it. Of course, Bart knows I built this one. I bought it from him, and I dare say he'd love to get a peck from Tom. She slid back the fine filigree clasp and flipped open the box. Thereupon the smooth crimson velvet. Ooh. This is a pretty color, and to imagine it in velvet. So beautiful. Lay a heavy golden locket. Voldemort reached out his hand, without invitation this time, and held it up to the light, staring at it. So then tomorrow, he said quietly as the light played upon an ornate serpentine S. That's right, said Hepzibah, delighted, apparently, at the sight of Voldemort gazing at her locket transfixed. That's a pain woman I live for, but I couldn't let it pass. Not for a treasure like that. Let's have it for my collection. Here, caught it, appearing from a ragged-looking woman who seemed to have stolen it, but had no idea of its true value. Oh, Hepzibah, if only you knew. There was no mistaking it this time. Voldemort's eyes flashed starward at the words. and Harry saw his knuckles going on the August chain. I do say birth paid their pittance, but that was pretty, isn't it? And again, all kinds of powers attributed to it. So I just keep it nice and safe. He reached out to take the locket back. For a moment, Harry thought Voldemort was not going to let go of it. But then it had slid through his fingers and was back in its red velvet cushion. So there you are, Tom dear, and I hope you enjoyed that. She looked him full in the face, and for the first time, Harry saw her foolish smile falter. Are you all right, dear? Oh, yes, said Voldemort quietly. Yes, I'm very well. I thought it was a trick of the light, I suppose, said Hepzibah, looking unnerved. And Harry guessed that she too had seen a momentary red gleam in Voldemort's eyes. Here, Hooky, take these away and lock them up again. The usual enchantments. Time to leave, Harry, said Dumbledore quietly. And as the little elf bobbed away, bearing the boxes, Dumbledore grasped Harry once again above the elbow, and they rose up through oblivion and back to Dumbledore's office. Hepzibah Smith died 2 days after that little scene, said Dumbledore, resuming his seat and indicating that Harry should do the same. Only the house elf was convicted by the Ministry of poisoning her mistress's evening cocoa by accident. I would hate for me to have poisoned cocoa. That does not sound appealing. No way, said Harry angrily. I see we are of one mind, said Dumbledore. Certainly there are many similarities between this death and that of the Riddles. In both cases, somebody else took the blame. Someone who had a clear memory of having caused the death. Loki confessed. She remembered putting something in her mistress's cocoa that turned out not to be sugar, but as evil and little known poison, said Dumbledore. It was concluded that she had not meant to do it, but being old and confused, Voldemort modified her memory, just like he did with Morphin. Yes, that is my conclusion too, said Dumbledore. And just as with Morphin, the Ministry was predisposed to suspect Toki, because she was a house elf, said Harry. He rarely felt more in sympathy with the Society for Mining Sense, of SPEW. Precisely, said Dumbledore. She was old, admitted to have tampered with the drink, and nobody at the Ministry bothered to inquire further. As in the case of Morphin, by the time I traced her and managed to extract this memory, her life was almost over, but her memory, of course, proves nothing except that Voldemort knows the existence of the cup and locket. At the time Loki was convicted, Hepzibah's family had realized that 2 of her greatest treasures were missing. It took them a while to be sure of this, for she had many hiding places, having always guarded her collection with jealousy. But before they were sure, beyond doubt, that the cup and locket were both gone, the assistant who worked at Borgin Works, the young man who visited Hepzibah so frequently and charmed her so well, had resigned his post and vanished. His superiors had no idea where he had gone. They were surprised as anyone at his disappearance, and that was the last I was seen or heard of Tom Riddle for a very long time. Now, said Dumbledore, if you don't mind, Harry, I want to paused once more to try and attend to certain points of her story. Voldemort had committed another murder. Whether it was his first since he killed the others, I do not know. But I think it was. This time, as you will have seen, because not for revenge, but for gain. He wanted the two fabulous trophies that four besotted old women children, just as he once robbed the other children at his orphanage, just as he had stolen his Uncle Morton's ring. So he ran off now with Hepzibah's cup and locket. But, said Harry, frowning, it seems mad, risking everything, throwing away his job just for those. Mad to you, perhaps, but not to Voldemort, said Dumbledore. I hope you will understand in due course exactly what these objects meant to him. Harry, but you must admit that it is not difficult to imagine that he saw the locket, at least, as rightfully his. It's not difficult for me to see that. Locket, maybe, said Harry, but why take the cup as well? It had belonged to another of Hogwarts' founders, said Dumbledore. I think he still felt a great pull toward the school, and that he could not resist an object so steep in Hogwarts history. There were other reasons, I think. I hope you will to be able to demonstrate them to you in due course. And while we're on the topic, I do have a theory about Horcruxes that seems very possible given the evidence. But I shall share that to you in another day. I'm foreshadowing this intentionally. But moving on. And now for the very last recollection I have to show you, at least until you manage to retrieve Professor Slughorn's memory files. 10 years separate Hookie's memory in this one. 10 years during which we can only guess at what Lord Voldemort was doing. Harry got to his feet once more as Dumbledore emptied the last memory into the penance. Whose memory is it? He asked. Mine, said Dumbledore. And Harry dived after Dumbledore through the shifting silver mass, landing in the very office he just left. There was Spock slumbering happily on his perch, and there behind the desk was Dumbledore, who looked very similar to the Dumbledore standing beside Harry, though both his hands were whole and undamaged, as his face was, perhaps, a little less lined. The one difference between the present-day office and this one was that it was snowing in the past bluish flecks that were drifting past the window in the dark and building up on the outside ledge. The younger Dumbledore seemed to be waiting for something, and sure enough, moments after their arrival, there was a knock on the door, and he said, "Enter." Harry let out a hastily stifled gasp. Voldemort had entered the room. His features were not those Harry had seen emerge from the great stone cauldron almost 2 years ago. They were not as snake-like. The eyes were not yet starlit, the face not yet mask-like. And yet he was no longer a handsome Tom Riddle. It was as though his features had been burned and blurred. They were waxy and oddly distorted, and the whites of the eyes now had a permanently bloody look, though the pupils were not yet the slits that Harry knew they would become. He was wearing a long black cloak, and his face was as pale as the snow glistening on his shoulders. The Dumbledore behind the desk showed no sign of surprise. Evidently this visit had been made by appointment. "Good evening, Tom," said Dumbledore easily. "Won't you sit down?" "Thank you," said Voldemort, and he took the seat to which Dumbledore had gestured, the very seat, by the looks of it, that Harry just vacated in the present. "I heard that you become headmaster," he said, and his voice was slightly higher and colder than it had been. "A worthy choice." "I'm glad you approve," said Dumbledore, smiling. "May I offer you a drink?" "That would be welcome," said Voldemort. "I've come a long way." Dumbledore stood and swept over to the cabinet where he now kept the pensieve, but which then was full of bottles. Having handed Voldemort a goblet of wine and poured one for himself, he returned to the seat behind his desk. "So, Tom, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Voldemort did not answer at once, but merely sipped his wine. "I do not call me Tom any more," he said. "These days I am known as— I know what you are known as," said Dumbledore, smiling pleasantly. "But to me, I'm afraid you will always be Tom Riddle. It is one of the irritating things about old teachers. I am afraid that they never forget that charge is useful beginnings." He raised his glass as though toasting Voldemort, whose face remained expressionless. Nevertheless, Harry felt the atmosphere in the room change subtly. Dumbledore's refusal to use Voldemort's chosen name was a refusal to allow Voldemort to dictate the terms of the meeting, and Harry could tell that Voldemort took it as such. "I'm surprised you have remained here so long," said Voldemort after a short pause. "I always wondered why a wizard such as yourself never wished to leave school." "Well," said Dumbledore, still smiling, "to a wizard such as myself there can be nothing more important than passing on ancient skills, helping hone your minds. If I remember correctly, you once saw the attraction of teaching too." "I see it still," said Voldemort. "I merely wonder why you, who are so often asked for advice by the ministry, and who have twice, I think, been offered the post of minister." "3 times at the last count, actually," said Dumbledore. "But the ministry never attracted me as a career. Again, something we have in common, I think." Voldemort inclined his head, and smiling, and took another sip of wine. Dumbledore did not break the silence that stretched between them now, but waited, with a look of pleasant expectancy, for Voldemort to talk first. "I've returned," he said after a little while. "Later, perhaps, than Professor Dickens expected, but I have returned nevertheless, to request again what he once told me to me to have. I have come to you to ask that you permit me to return to this castle to teach. I think you must know that I have seen and done much since I left this place. I could show and tell you of experiences they can gain from none other wizard." Dumbledore considered Voldemort over the top of his own goblet a while before speaking. "Yes, I certainly do know that you have seen and done much since leaving us," he said proudly. "The news of your doings have reached all school, Tom. You should be sorry to believe half of them." Voldemort's expression remained impassive as he said, "Greatness inspires envy. Envy engenders respite. Spite spawns lies." This kind of reminds me of— how does it go in Star Wars? Um, how does it go in Star Wars? how does it go in Star Wars? Um, I think it goes, and you guys who are mostly Star Wars buffs can correct me. I'm just going by memory. But I think it goes along the lines of fear leads to hate, hate leads to suffering, suffering leads to the dark side. I don't remember. I'm just going from memory here. But that's literally what that reminds me of. And again, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. I'm going by memory. But yes, that's what that reminds me of. I'm not kidding. But moving on. You must know this, Dumbledore. You covet greatness. What have you been doing? Do you? Asked Dumbledore delicately. Certainly, said Voldemort, and his eyes seemed to burn red. I've experimented. I've pushed the boundaries of magic further, perhaps than they have ever been pushed. Of some kinds of magic, Dumbledore corrected him finally. Of some. Of others you may forgive me. Willfully ignorant. For the first time, Voldemort smiled. It was a taut leer, an evil thing, more threatening than a look of rage. Ooh, that's chilling. You know what I want, he said softly, but nothing I have seen in the world has supported your famous pronouncements that love is more powerful than my kind of magic, Dumbledore. Perhaps you have been looking in the wrong places, said Dumbledore. Or suggested Dumbledore. I guess same difference. Well then, what better place to start my fresh researches than here at Horcruxes, said Voldemort. Will you let me return? Will you let me show my knowledge with your students? I place myself and my talents at your disposal. I am yours to command. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows. And what will become of those whom you command? What will happen to those who call themselves, so rumor has it, the Death Eaters? Harry could tell that Voldemort had not expected Dumbledore to know this name. He saw Voldemort's eyes flash red again, and the soot-like nostrils flared. My friends, he said after a moment's pause, will carry on without me, I'm sure. I'm glad to hear that you consider them friends, said Dumbledore. I was under the impression that they are more in the order of servants. Well, you're not wrong, Dumbledore. You're not wrong. You are mistaken, said Voldemort. And if I were to go to the Hog's Head tonight, I would not find a group of them, not those here. Most of them Dolohov awaiting your return. Dolohov is foreshadowing. Devoted friends and things. To travel this far with you on a snowy night, merely to wish you luck as you attempted to secure a teaching post. Could be no doubt that Dumbledore's detailed knowledge of those with whom he was traveling was even less welcome to Voldemort. However, he rallied almost at once. You are ominous as ever, Dumbledore. No, merely friendly with the local barman, said Dumbledore later. Now, Tom. Dumbledore set down his empty glass and drew himself up in his seat, the tips of his fingers kept together in a very charismatic gesture. Now speak openly. Why have you come here tonight, surrounded by henchmen, to request a job we both know you do not want? Voldemort looked coldly surprised. a job I do not want. On the contrary, Dumbledore, I want it very much. I want to come back to Hogwarts, but you do not want to teach any more than you wanted to when you were 18. What is it you're after, Tom? Why not try and open a quest for once? Voldemort sneered. If you do not want to give me a job, of course I won't, said Dumbledore, and I don't think for a moment you expect me to. Nevertheless, you came here. You asked. You must have had a purpose. Voldemort stood up. He looked less like Tom Riddle than ever, his features thick with rage. This is your final word. It is, said Dumbledore, also standing. And we have nothing more to say to each other. No, nothing, said Dumbledore, and a great sadness filled his face. The time is long gone when I could frighten you. The burning mortar would force you to make a payment for your crime. But I wish I could, Tom. I wish I could. For a second, Harry was on the verge of shouting a pointless warning. He was sure that Voldemort's hand had twitched toward his pocket and his wand. But then the moment passed. Voldemort turned away. The door was closing, and he was gone. Harry felt Dumbledore's hand close over his arm again, and moments later they were standing together on almost the same spot. But there was no snow building on the window ledge, and Dumbledore's hand was blackened, dead-looking once more. Why? Said Harry at once, looking up into Dumbledore's face. Why did he come back? Did you ever find out? I have ideas, said Dumbledore, but no more than that. What ideas, sir? I shall tell you, Harry, when you have retrieved that memory from Professor Slughorn, said Dumbledore. When you have that last piece of the jigsaw, everything that I hope will be clear to both of us. Harry was still burning with curiosity, and even though Dumbledore had walked to the door and was holding it open for him, he did not move at once. Was he after the defense against the job again, sir? He didn't say. Well, he definitely wanted the defense against the Dark Arts job, said Dumbledore. The aftermath of our little meeting proved that. You see, we have never been able to keep a defense against the Dark Arts teacher for longer than a year since I refused the post to Lord Voldemort. And that is the end of this camping chapter. Thank you for sticking with me to the end. And join me next week for chapter 21, The Unknowable Room. Until then, happy birthdays to J.K. Rowling and the character of Harry Potter. Bye!